with LeJune Singleton, LLC, Fitness, Health, Nutrition, and Wellness Podcast. Today, I would like to welcome professional tap dancer, teacher, former performer on Sesame Street Live Show, as well as co-author of Food as a Prescription, Staci Cascio.
Hello. How's it going?
Great. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me. This is really great.
No problem. So can you give a background on yourself?
Sure. I started dancing when I was 2, but I really think that I started dancing in the womb. And then I became a professional dancer. I toured with Sesame Street Live. I moved to Chicago from my hometown of Kansas City, and I taught dance. I became a massage therapist. I learned about my food sensitivities and allergies in Chicago, and then I moved to New York about 6.5 years ago after I met my husband, or my now husband, and then we co-authored a book kind of about discovering those sensitivities and how to implement that into your everyday life. I still dance too.
Okay. So, you speak about dancing. How were you able to make that transition from, your professional life? Now you're a co-author of a book.
Yeah. So early on, before I really knew I had any allergies or anything like that, I was kind of having a hard time performing and teaching and doing all of the things because my joints were super swollen and I was just having a lot of pain and inflammation. And luckily, one of my cohorts in the community theater I was into, said, I know somebody you should see. And she was a nutritionist, and she did what was called an EAV screening, where you get kind of hooked up to a computer with a couple of metal nodes. One you hold in one hand, and the other one, she touches meridian points on your other hand too, while the computer was basically telling her which foods it was testing, quote unquote, right? And so at the end, I got this spit out, spreadsheet, if you will, of all of the foods I was sensitive to, and even how many of each macronutrient I should have per day, and what vitamins I was deficient in, which is like mind-blowing to get all of that in one swoop. Right. Yeah. So once I was able to really implement that, my inflammation went down. I lost a lot of weight that I was retaining because of the inflammation. I was able to heal my gut and process foods that I could eat better. So I was absorbing the correct nutrients and things like that. So it was, it kind of brought me back, really. Like I was considering not doing that anymore because it hurt so much. And I thought it was time for me to be done, but I was only in my early 30s. And I was like, man, I am not done with this. Right. So I was glad that she sort of pointed me in that direction. And that kind of got me started on the journey.
So was it an intolerance, an allergy, or a sensitivity?
A little bit of both. A little bit of everything kind of thing. I definitely have an allergy to, I guess you could say, soy, corn, and dairy. I believe the sensitivity comes in, well, I don't know, this is kind of hot button, and I don't know how far you want me to delve into this, but most recently, my chiropractor who does the nutrition response testing tested me to wheat. And I test fine to wheat itself. However, in America, we do this thing called spraying glyphosate on our foods, on our crops. and it's the pesticides that I'm really allergic to. So, kind of figure it out at this point. I feel like I would be one of the people, and it doesn't happen for everyone, who could go to Europe and eat gluten-based products. Like I could probably go to Italy and have pizza. However, I would have to not have cheese, because it really is the proteins in dairy that I'm allergic to, even casein, which is found in goat's milk and goat's cheese. So I would have to have it without cheese. Tomatoes kind of bother me, but they're more inflammatory than an allergy. They just make my joints swell a little bit. But I believe it's really the pesticides that I'm most allergic to with the food supply in this country. And that's kind of controversial, but I believe I've narrowed it down really to that.
And I definitely agree. I had a food sensitivity test. The first one I did was in 2019. And most of the common stuff that I ate was on there, from chicken, almonds, eggs, cashews, the mushrooms. Like it was a large dairy, yogurt, large supply of stuff. So I literally cut everything out. Within 2 weeks, I dropped down 12 pounds.
Yep.
And of course, when you tell family and friends, I don't eat this stuff anymore. And they're like, what do you mean? I can never do that. But you see the effects that those foods are impacting your body. You're able to make that transition. Yeah. And you think about, as you're talking about here in America, with chicken, they are injecting it with hormones. Kids are developing at a very large rate.
Yes.
From the age of 6, girls are developing breasts. That's crazy.
It is. Yeah. We eat pasture raised, no hormone poultry. We eat grass fed beef, and wild caught fish. However, our oceans are contaminated. So is it better to eat farm raised? Is it better to eat wild caught? There's evidence on both sides, for what's better. Right. I say, give it a shot. See what works for you, because what works for you doesn't necessarily work for me, and what works for me doesn't necessarily work for someone else. So you have to do the thing that you talked about, which is the elimination part. And then once you heal your gut, then you can start to add in other things. I did have a point last year where I was down to lamb, codfish, shrimp, zucchini, and carrots.
Oh, wow.
That's it. That's what I was down to, because I was reacting to everything else. Everything else. And that was rough. That was rough. But you have to think of it as poison. And that's how I got around it, was I had to do a mental shift, I know how this thing makes my body feel. Do I want to feel like that? No, I don't. And you're talking about when family members say that to you, you say, well, if this food made you feel like X, would you eat it? No. Exactly.
Very, very true. And I recently did one this year, which was another food sensitivity test, which you submit hair samples, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And this test gave environmental sensitivities as well as food sensitivities, gut sensitivities, and rubber, leather. It was just a long laundry list of sensitivities, and my car has leather seats.
Yeah. I bet you it's the chemicals they use to process those items.
Stuff that's in nail polish, stuff that's in makeup.
Yeah.
It affects women more, especially our hormone levels when it comes to our uterus.
This is why I don't wear makeup.
Me either. I only just do like lip gloss, and that's the most, but it's still some toxins in that.
Yeah.
But just learning these things. And we as women, we're in a nail salon every week, every 2 weeks, getting our nails done, and the chemicals that's in the acrylic.
Yeah, I cut that out a long time ago. Candles have soy in them, most of them. I changed my shampoo, my soap, my dish soap, anything that comes, any cleaning products,
right.
Anything that comes in contact with my skin and or something that I would inhale. That was what I changed also early on. One of the things that still bothers me, most of my allergies, my environmental allergies went away. So I stopped having sinus infections. I stopped getting those issues. Once I cut out all of those things that my body was reacting to, it was actually those things that my body was reacting to, not necessarily, or making me more susceptible to the pollen, to the whatever. One of the only things that still bothers me, though, is grass.
Me too.
There's nothing I can do to get rid of that thing. Everybody's like, oh, go barefoot on the grass. I'm like, oh my God, no, I can't do it.
And I definitely can't stand the smell of grass, though.
No.
So definitely. So you mentioned you wrote the book with your husband. What was the reason that he got tested?
So we met each other. I was already in this process for about 4 to 5 years or so, I'd say, before I met him. And when I met him, he had taken out high fructose corn syrup from his diet. He had been previously diagnosed with bipolar ADHD and discussed with his therapies taking out high fructose corn syrup because of what it does to your body, really, and where it puts you, especially in regards to ADHD and your moods, and what kind of impact that particular thing has on those. So he had already done that, but he didn't really consider other things yet, per se. For 20 years, he internally bled and had an experience where he went to a doctor. So he's a dancer too. Of course, boys, when they're dancing growing up, mostly get bullied for dancing. Yeah, so he was bullied a lot when he was growing up. And then as an adult, he went to a doctor who then suggested he must be gay and not coming to terms with it because he was bleeding. Exactly. And just because he was a dancer, that's the conclusion that this doctor drew to the internal bleeding and how it was coming out. Because it was coming out in his stool. And, right. So, as you can imagine, he basically went, okay, well, I'm not telling anybody about this anymore. If I'm not going to be heard, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So he just dealt with it for like 20 years. And I think at some point he realized it had something to do with the food he was eating, but I don't think he was ready to really make that correlation and change the food he was eating, or he didn't know how to change the food he was eating at that point in his life. So he waited. When he met me and we started dating and we started going out to restaurants, he would see me say to the waiter all the time, okay, I can't have gluten, all the things, right? So he actually suggested that I make a business card with all of my allergies on it that we could just hand to the waiter or waitress and they could take back to the kitchen and work out that sort of thing. So that's one of our things that we suggest in our book is making a food card. But he saw how that impacted me. And if I accidentally got cross-contaminated, he saw what happened to me. I would be in the bathroom or whatever. I would have tight joints or whatever the case may be, whatever the symptom was. He went, huh. And then I was watching a thyroid summit because I have Hashimoto's. So I pay attention to all the thyroid things. And there was a doctor who was speaking about the gut lining and about how it's a cheesecloth and about how even if you're not sensitive to it, gluten, when you eat it, rips holes in the cheesecloth of the lining of your stomach.
Wow.
Whether you're sensitive to it or not, it rips holes in the lining of your stomach and your intestines. And I had been trying to get him to understand that he should probably go gluten and dairy free. Now, I suggested gluten and dairy because dairy is a very similar protein chain to gluten. And typically, people have what's called gluten cross-reactivity if they don't also cut out dairy at the same time. Your body sees dairy as gluten because they're very similar protein chains. So I was trying to convince him to at least go gluten and dairy free. I really wanted him to also do soy and corn, but it's hard when you first are trying to wrap your brain around losing all of these foods that you love and that you're used to eating your whole life. And why are you all of a sudden having a problem with these foods when you didn't before?
Right.
So I got him to go gluten and dairy free for a summer. We travel every summer teaching dance in the country, in different parts of the country. So he lost 35 pounds over that summer. And he went, huh, I guess there must be something to this. And the chiropractor that he grew up dancing with in the neighborhood here in New York also does nutrition. And his nutrition is nutrition response testing, where you measure the body's energy reaction to certain food items or environmental items, all kinds of what could be considered allergens. And when we got home that summer, he said to Dr. Rob, who actually wrote the foreword in our book, I think I'm ready for the nutrition response test. So he traded tap dance lessons for the nutrition response test and learned that he actually can have dairy, but he had to eliminate gluten, corn, and soy, as well as a few other things. At first, he couldn't have poultry, same thing as what you were told. But once we were able to heal his gut, he was able to put back in the no hormone pasture raised version of poultry. No tomatoes, which for an Italian New Yorker,
saying, let me cut your hand off.
Gluten and tomatoes? Are you freaking kidding? You know, like he was like, okay, this is gonna be hard. You know, and he goes for long periods of time without tomatoes, but he knows what it's going to do to him if he has some tomato sauce. So he you know, he'll have tomato sauce every now and then, but he won't have it constantly, you know, so he can tolerate a little bit here and there, but not, you know, super consistent. But that was his journey, and I'm glad I was able to help him, you know, feel better about his life. He stopped bleeding for periods of time. I would say, I think he says about 85% of the time he doesn't have to deal with that. And I think some of it is maybe some cross-contamination issues. Maybe, you know, some days are more sensitive than others. It just kind of, you know, and it might be environmental things that he's not dealing with or doesn't know about that are causing that reaction. But to go from I mean, he says it looked like a horror show, you know, to go from that to not bleeding at all 85% of the time is like mind blowing.
And was he given a diagnosis for?
You know, not really. His grandmother had colitis. So, and he gets these ulcers or sores on his skin on the outside. So we think that that might be happening to him on the inside. So we have a suspicion that it's ulcerative colitis, but there's never been any diagnosis. And to be honest, he doesn't really care about a diagnosis because the thing that makes him feel better is what's important, not necessarily the label of whatever might be happening.
Gotcha. Yeah, so definitely the food, changing his diet has definitely helped him.
Absolutely.
So have you tried to slowly reincorporate some of the foods back into your...
You know, yes.
So what did it look like for you?
Yeah, so you have to do it a little bit at a time because otherwise, and you have to keep a food diary. That is like the number one thing. If you want to really go through this and you want to be sure what the thing is that you're reacting to, a food diary will be the thing that you want to look for. I will say that because I have Hashimoto's, which affects the thyroid, which then affects your hormones in your body, I believe I am also going through perimenopause. And my family has a history of early menopause, and I'm only 43, but I think I've been going through it for at least a couple of years already. And I think it's due to the Hashimoto's and my age, of course, but the hormone fluctuation has a lot to do with my food sensitivities. And I tell you this because some days I have sensitivities to certain things. Other days, those sensitivities to those particular foods don't exist. And it's kind of like a crapshoot on any given day, what thing is going to affect me. And I think it's because of my hormone fluctuation. So I'm in the process of getting those hormones tested and seeing if I'm anti-prescription medication because I believe that a prescription that I was taking for bacteria in my throat brought out my dormant autoimmune issues. So after that happened to me, I did take some prescriptions for a while until I found the food avenue. And then I was able to get off of those prescriptions and let the food changes and environmental changes deal with, you know, the inflammation and the autoimmune issues. However, once you involve hormones, it's a little bit difficult. I mean, you can do it with diet. And I'm going to also be looking into that because there are hormones in foods. I think I also have a histamine intolerance. So when I make food, I really can't have the leftovers because it develops histamine when it's sitting in the refrigerator, especially protein. So I'm in the process of figuring out what hormones need to be regulated, when they need to be regulated, and then how. So I'm about to have my hormones tested. You have to do that at certain days within your cycle. So I'm waiting for that to occur. And then I'll get those hormone levels tested, and then we'll go from there, you know, and make a plan. I'm seeing a functional medicine doctor, so not a Western medicine doctor. So they'll help me through this alternatively. I'm seeing an acupuncturist who's helping my hormone cycle regulate, you know, to where I'm clearly lacking in a specific hormone at certain periods of my cycle, which is why that's what menopause is, And so she's, helping the system function better, I guess you could say, function better. Yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I slowly start to, because they say after 3 months, 6 months, and a year, you can slowly start incorporating foods back in. And I noticed the same effect, bloat. But this time I could really see it because I was aware of it.
It was clean, yeah.
Yeah, I was aware of it because, we eat our foods all together. We're eating protein, we're eating carbs, we're eating vegetables together, and also we're drinking.
Yeah.
And I noticed bloating. I noticed, my face was breaking out.
Yes.
Those were, some of the major things that I noticed with me. And I was like, okay, well, apparently I still can't eat this. So I, try to cut it back out. And ginger and garlic is one of the major ones in mine, which is difficult because if majority of all seasonings have garlic in it.
Yeah. Have you noticed if there's a difference in quality?
I've gotten like stuff that's organic and it still has that same effect. And it's the expensive organic. It's not just the non-GMO,
all the things.
Yeah. And somebody slaps, organic on it. I noticed certain teas that have ginger. Same thing, like my stomach, and I literally have to give the teas to my friends.
Wow. What about like whole ginger?
Whole ginger is the same. And I remember when I first moved to Maryland, someone gave me just flat out ginger tea and I had a reaction to it. So it started to, make sense.
Yeah. Wow. That's tough when you start having those seasonings, because it's bad enough to have to avoid poultry.
Right.
That's hard. And then you add on seasonings on top of it, and it's tough to already go out to dinner with any sort of food allergy or sensitivity. And when you start adding in that, I've noticed that a lot of chefs start maybe like freaking out, and they give you the most plain thing ever, and you're like, I can have salt and pepper, it's really okay, but they give you something that's not seasoned at all, and you're like, oh my god, why?
Like I could have did this at home. So,
exactly. Yeah, it's tough. In our book we also have a list of questions that we ask when we call restaurants or things like that, ahead of time, because we don't want to show up and then not be able to eat. So that's ginger and garlic, man. That's rough. I mean, I did spend about 3 months just having salt and pepper and those 5 things that I listed before. That was some of the most boring months of my life.
Definitely. Especially, I go out with friends and I'm like, okay, yeah, can you take out this, and this, and this? And they're like, okay, well, just bring her. And they joke. They're like, okay, just bring her the chicken and, the fish, and it's just cooked. Don't worry about the seafood. So I'm like, no butter, don't add butter, don't add any garlic butter or something like that. So
and the quality of oils is a tough thing for restaurants to manage, because they have to buy commercial amounts. So they don't get to decide the quality of the oil that they're using. Sure, they might be using 100% olive oil, but it might be a fake olive oil. I mean, that exists. And restaurants they have a bottom line, and they have to meet that bottom line, and then probably they're not buying the highest quality, and I feel like that's what I react to when I go out to restaurants, is the quality of products that they just only have access to.
Right.
So even if you're having the fish cooked in olive oil, it could be an olive oil that makes you react. And there you are, and you're like, well, okay, I'm going to have to stay here for about an hour until I come down off of this reaction.
All right. Yeah, I literally had a client ask me yesterday, what did I think about Thai food? And I said, oh, it's good. And she's like, well, her nephew has been eating Thai food and has lost weight. She asked me, did I think it was healthy? And I said, it's all about how the restaurant cooks it. What type of oil are they using? Are they using peanut oil? Are they using olive oil? Are they using vegetable oil? Like the list goes on and on and on. Yeah. We don't know what they're using. Mm-hmm. So you have to pay attention to how your body reacts to it. And I said, also, he's a male. Men lose weight like this. Women, we're struggling.
Yep. So, hormones.
Yeah, and that's what I told her. I was like, it's hormones. And you also have to look at what type of, is he just getting vegetables? Is he getting, shrimp? And I was like, too much shrimp, high cholesterol. It's things you have to look at. Too much red meat is not good. It leads to heart disease. So I was like, you have to look at those things, but everything should be eaten in moderation. So I was like, can I say it's healthy? It depends on how you eat it.
Yeah.
Put in it. So
yeah. And it's different for everyone. What's healthy for one person isn't necessarily healthy for another.
Right.
So it's so hard to say unless people have gone through the personal testing, like the hair strand DNA testing that you went through. I would be way interested in that. It's like, I like coming at it from all of the angles. My friend looked at my initial list that I got from the EAV screening, and she's a data analyst, so it makes sense that this would come from her. She looked at all of the data and she said, oh, well, you can eat what your ancestors ate. I couldn't have tropical fruits. Like, clearly, I'm like, see-through. So of course I can't have tropical things because that's not what my ancestors ate and digested. Right. I can have potatoes. I can have, like the things of my ancestors are easy for me. And it was, I wouldn't have thought about it like that if she hadn't have said that to me, but it was eye-opening. It was really eye-opening. And I went, wow, I never thought about it like that. But it makes total sense. Like, that's what your DNA is made up of. So why wouldn't that be the truth? The thing.
That is definitely true. And, I think in this day and age and time, we are so into trying new foods and opening our horizons to new things. And we are traveling and, you want to, oh, wow, I'm going to, Mexico, I want to try what they have. I'm going to Jamaica. I'm going to Costa Rica. You want to try what they're eating and feel like, oh, okay, well, this is something I may have to look into when I get back at an international market. Yeah. So it does make sense because, our DNA is made up from our ancestors. And I never thought about it like that, of how, your lineage, what they were eating.
Yeah. Your body has all of this history in it, even though you didn't personally experience it, it's there at the lowest cellular level. So of course your body is digesting this food better than that food, that's what you're genetically predisposed to do.
Right. So that definitely makes sense. So talking about your book, how did you guys decide to say, hey, let's do this? And if you can show us the book.
Yeah, here's the book, Food as a Prescription. And our foreword is by our chiropractor, Dr. Rob Gucciardo. When we were traveling, we discovered groups on Facebook that had to do with gluten-free travel or gluten-free in this particular area. One in particular, I know there's a group on Facebook called Gluten-Free Austin, right? So like when you're in Austin, Texas, you go to this group and look at all these restaurants. And multiple times a day, we saw people posting, oh my God, I just got told I have celiac. What do I do? How do I go to the grocery store? What do I buy? My son just got told he had to eliminate all of these things. How do I help him shop? How do we do this? Right? So we kind of looked at each other and we went, wow, well, we were saying the same thing to every person who made that post. This is a book, is what we kind of looked at each other one day and we were like, I'm tired of saying the same thing in a comment. Let's write a book. And then all we have to do in that comment is say, here's our book. All of this information exists in this book. So that's what we did. Anthony started speaking into his phone, just random thoughts. When we would be out, anything, whatever happened, he would just speak. There's one app called Otter.ai where it transcribes your speaking because Siri doesn't really understand him with his New York accent. So it's a little rough to just go to a note. So anyway, he would say it in Otter, then we would put that information in a note on our phone. And then once he was like, you know what, I think I have a really good bit of information. I went through the note and I organized it into what I thought were eventually chapters. And then it just kind of evolved from there.
And what can, people look for in your book?
So there's tips and tricks about how to live this type of anti-inflammatory lifestyle. There's our stories and how we came to this conclusion that this was the best lifestyle choice for us, so that people don't feel alone. And I think that that's really the biggest key, is that you're not alone. I promise there are so many people out there struggling just like you are with how to feel better, with how to, not have to deal with the pain every day and not have to have easy access to a bathroom every time you eat a meal. You don't have to feel like that. So there's tips and tricks on how to do that. What questions we ask restaurants, how we dine out. It really also talks about, we did go to Jamaica on his parents' 50th anniversary wedding trip. And we had to call ahead and talk to, because it's an all-inclusive resort. You want to make sure you can actually eat and you're not going to starve the whole time you're there. We went on a cruise, how to make that work for you. And you have to be your own advocate. And don't be afraid to ask to be healthy. It's really okay. You don't have to feel ashamed. You don't have to feel guilty that you have to ask for this special thing. You have to look at it as you have to look out for number one, right? And no one else is going to look out for you if you don't. So the mindset that you have to be in, we talk about that as well. And looking for a doctor, don't just take what the doctor says. Be your own advocate. If it doesn't feel good to you, look for another doctor. If you're not vibing, that's okay. Not every doctor is for every person.
I agree.
So, and what works for you doesn't necessarily work for your spouse or whomever else, So we talk about that. We give some recipes in the back. Basically, if you were told this morning that you needed to eliminate all of these things, And then you went and you bought our book and you read it in the afternoon. You were able to go grocery shopping and have yourself an allergen sensitive meal that night. And by the time you went to bed, you just kind of felt a sense of calm about how you were going to be able to do this. It can happen. You can do it. You know, it's not as overwhelming as it may seem. And I think that if I was going to say a number one thing to do to make it seem not as overwhelming as it may seem, instead of taking the list of things you can't have and staring at that like, oh God, what am I going to do with this? Flip that over and write down all of the things you can have and use that as your grocery list, basically. And then it's like, oh, wow, I can have all of these things. You might discover something that you actually like that you didn't know that you liked before because all of these other things filled your diet. And now you're like, ooh, beets? Oh, I actually like beets. I didn't know that I liked beets. You know, I didn't know. That's a very personal thing for me. I didn't know that I liked beets. I used to watch my grandmother eat beets and they were just like this like weird purple, weird jelly looking thing, right? And I went to Seasons 53 and had roasted beets and I was like, wow, I didn't even know I liked beets. You know, so there's a discovery that can happen about things that you didn't even know that could be a part of your life. And it's really cool, actually, I think.
I definitely agree. Because, you know, the thing I like about Everly Wells food sensitivity test, it tells you from your high, mild, moderate, and it tells you how your body responds normally. Mm-hmm. And with that normal, it tells you everything that you can eat and your body responds normally to. Because I've gone to the GI doctor who's told me everything that I can't eat. But when the question comes, well, what can I eat?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you know, just cut out those things.
Right.
That doesn't help me when I'm in the grocery store.
You know, we sat down and we made a list of all the things that we can have. And it was eye-opening. It was really eye-opening. So that's usually the first task that I encourage people to do. Because there's things, you know, that you don't think about.
Yeah, definitely. So where can your book be found and what's next for you and your husband?
Yeah, so we're on Amazon. We're actually anywhere that carries any book with an ISBN number. So that's anywhere. The easiest place is Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or you can just go to our website and we link you there. Our website is the title of our book, foodasaprescription.com. And then we link you to a place to buy our book. So if you get to Amazon and you're like, oh, what was that thing? you know, go to our website, foodasaprescription.com, and we'll link you there. What was the second part of what you just said?
What's next for you and your husband? Like,
what's next? Yeah. Well, lots of things, actually. So we have a few recipes in our book. We're working on a cookbook. So lots of recipes where we'll tell stories about those recipes as well. So it's not just recipes. You kind of get a little more insight into us. I can give you a little snippet I'm going to tell a story about garlic specifically, which I'm sorry that you can't have garlic yet, but living in an Italian household now, garlic is like one of the major food groups.
Like water.
Yes. So I'm going to tell a story about garlic specifically, so you can look forward to that. But we currently live in New York. We are actually moving to Florida in about a year or so. And we're going to open 100% gluten-free, soy-free, and corn-free, sometimes dairy-free bakery.
Oh, nice.
Bakery plus. We'll have a few other items besides bakery items, but that's the initial focus is a bakery. Because when we travel, there's a lot of gluten-free options. However, we have other things than just gluten sensitivity. So it's hard for me personally. I have more than he does, to find really high quality baked items that I can have. You know, I can't even have gluten-free oats. I can't have quinoa.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of times that's what a lot of people have gravitated to cooking with. And I get it. They're great things to cook with for gluten-free baking. But if you also can't have them, it's not really good, you know? So that's going to be what we're doing.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how can anyone reach out for services? I know you mentioned your book title is one way, but what are other ways that people can reach out to you?
So we're on all the socials, even TikTok, but it's mostly on Anthony's TikTok. I don't really TikTok. But we, what does he call it? Book Talk is a thing. So, if you look for hashtag Book Talk, when you're on TikTok, you'll probably find us. But Food as a Prescription or Loca Foods Inc., LOCAFOODSINC on any of the socials. But really, if you come to our website, and you sign up for our email list, you get another 6 free recipes and a free downloadable food diary. So it's kind of cool, and you can stay in touch with us that way. We put out a list of the podcasts that we're on every month, and or anything else that we have going on in our life. We want to start getting into like the gluten-free expos and things like that as well. So yeah.
One thing that I definitely liked was in the email you sent me with your bio. It says helping people tap into their healthiest selves.
Yes.
And I was like, I love that because it definitely talks about, what you do or used to do as being a tap dancer. So that was so cute.
Yeah, we try to cross the two because they really do cross. What you eat and put into your body really just helps you live your best life in whatever it is that you do. So, it helps us tap dance relatively pain-free.
That's true.
So we have to cross the two.
Definitely true. Well, I thank you, Staci, for being here and educating and talking about your own personal experience as well as your husband, the struggles you guys been through with food and sensitivities and allergies. Thank you. Would love to have you back when the cookbook comes out and kind of talk about some of the recipes in that. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. And till next time, you guys, please go get checked. If you have inflammation in your body, it is not bad, trust me, from my own personal experience. And I've worked with clients and I can literally see inflammation in their bodies. And I always refer to having a food sensitivity test, allergy test, or intolerance test. It will change your life. It will change your health. Because the first thing that happens with inflammation goes straight to your heart, which causes a higher risk of you getting COVID and any other illnesses. Mm-hmm. So please, you can do the test that she recommended. Is that only through a nutritionist or how?
There's a couple. So I did an EAV screening, and I believe she was like a certified nutritionist. I'm not sure. I would just search EAV screening near and then wherever your area is. And then the second one is nutrition response test. Now that was administered by our chiropractor, but you can search nutrition response test near, whatever your area is. Or we do give Dr. Rob's information in our book, and you could reach out to him and he will help you find a practitioner in your area.
Okay, that's awesome. I did Everly Well and I did my allergy test. Those are two that I personally did, and it did change my life. You can
Yeah.
also go to your doctor or find a nutritionist or a dietitian to do that test. But please, let's stop avoiding and, because food is so good, we don't want to give it up, but it can also be putting your health at major risk. So
Totally.
until next time, this is LeJune. June Singleton, LLC, Fitness, Health, Nutrition. Thank you again, Staci. And please find her book, show your book again so they can remember. Please grab that book because I'm going to grab it. So until next time, thank you guys.